Hey, everybody, welcome to Processing Skills That Make Learning Click. We are going to be deep diving into all kinds of processing skills that help our kids be able to learn how they need to learn. So, without further ado, let's dive in. I am Christina Abels. I am a dyslexia therapist. I'm also interactive metronome certified, which we'll talk about in more detail further on. But I am the mom to four amazing kids, two of which actually have dyslexia. And I also have dyslexia. So I completely understand the struggle on multiple levels. This work is very personal to me. And this is actually why I started Beautiful Minds Learning Center to help families just like ours be able to navigate those literacy struggles and find the relief that they need to become functionally literate and just become really awesome readers and spellers. So you're probably wondering why I'm talking about dyslexia so much. And this is absolutely my background. But we had found as we worked with our kids is that they actually had some processing differences that we kind of saw across the board with a lot of our clients that we were working with. So it's not that they go hand in hand, that, if you have dyslexia, that you're absolutely going to be struggling with every area of processing skills. But we do find that that tends to kind of go together. So we ended up learning about this and getting more information into how that actually works in our brains. And so I'm going to share that with you today. All right, so let's move into it. Does this sound familiar? Your child has trouble keeping up in school, or they forget the instructions that you gave them the moment that you gave it to them. They are having a constant battle with reading and learning just in general. You've tried everything. You've tried all kinds of tutoring. You've tried everything that you could possibly think of, and nothing is actually working. Processing skills in general, and then we're going to go into each one individually. So let's just understand what they are. So, processing skills are the brain's ability to be able to receive information, interpret that information, and then use that information. It is very, very different from intelligence. So, you can actually have some kids who are very highly intelligent, and maybe they're dealing with some working memory issues. So, it's not 100% correlated to intelligence. Processing skills are the foundation for all learning. We use these skills when we are learning any kind of information. You'll understand that as we go forward here. But basically, reading, spelling, writing, math, following directions, these all depend on having strong processing skills. Okay, so why does this matter? A lot of school evaluations don't assess all of them. Some might be assessed in certain situations, but not all of them. And so sometimes, as your child's kind of going through, and their teacher just kind of get in a gist for how they function and whatnot. Like I mentioned before, that split can be occurring where your child seems to be like, oh yeah, they're fine. They can understand a story that I'm telling them, or they're compensating really well. So maybe it looks like they're reading really well. Oh yeah, no, they're doing great. But they really could have some things that are going on underneath. And so as we go through all of these different processing skills, we're going to kind of show what some signs of weaknesses look like so that you might be able to identify whether or not that's actually occurring in your child. But basically, when processing skills are doing well, when they are strong, learning clicks. You can see that little brain, right? And he's lifting his weights. He's like, yes, I could do it. I'm doing this, and it's great. And when processing skills are not fully formed, maybe they're strong in certain areas and not in others. Learning can look very hard. So here's your exhausted brain. And that's kind of a good image of what a child's brain um, can kind of end up being like after they have worked so hard in school and they have all of these deficiencies going on that are undiagnosed. So okay, let's move on into the 6 different areas of processing skills that we usually focus on. So that's our visual working memory, auditory working memory, visual processing, auditory processing, and then processing speed and logic and reasoning. So we're going to deep dive into every one of these areas. Let's start with visual working memory. So, what is this? Visual working memory is the ability to hold and use visual information in the mind. So, it's not just a memory part where I'm just hanging on to it, but it's also the ability to use that information while I'm holding on to it. So, you're kind of doing double duty with that. So, some examples might be maybe I'm having some difficulty copying from the board. I can see it, but when I go to put it on my paper, I might actually not be able to write exactly how it is on the board because I'm not holding that information. It's getting lost once I see it and I try to put it onto the paper. Remembering written directions, that's another great example of visual working memory. One of, in particular, an example that I've experienced is written phone numbers. So I can see a phone number and then I go to try to put that in my phone. And there was actually a period in time when that was difficult for me. I would kind of forget the last few digits before I would get it into the phone, and I'd have to keep looking and keep referring back to my sheet. So, kind of hanging on to visual information like that can be difficult. And in my situation, it actually was after a brain injury that I had. So it's not always something that you're born with. It can be different things that can take place medically. But more signs of weakness is losing your place while you're reading. Like when your child is reading and they're often skipping lines, that can be an indication that they're having some difficulty with that. Forgetting sight words repeatedly. Sight words are one of those things that in our English language that we kind of have to remember, like the word have, for example. It doesn't follow the letter sound correspondence as well as the spelling rules. So if we were to follow how to pronounce that word, we would call it have instead of have. But it is what it is, and there's all different reasons for our sight words. But if we're constantly forgetting those sight words over and over and over again, we can be dealing with some aspect of visual working memory difficulties. So it's often mistaken for laziness or not paying attention. And you can kind of, you can kind of, if you just kind of put yourself in your child's shoes for just a second, that they're kind of sitting there, and if they're having some issues in this area, they're having difficulty just doing the task. And so they may be sitting there and giving it a really awesome try, but hey, they might be an extremely smart person, and so they're, hey, you're super smart. You should be able to do this, right? But they could be having some difficulties in this area. So it's something to kind of think about um, when we're looking at our child and saying, okay, are you being a child and you just don't want to do this, or is there something at the root of what's making you kind of hesitate to doing a task? Okay, let's move into auditory working memory. So, visual working memory is holding on to visual information. Auditory working memory is holding on to auditory information. So, you're holding that and then you're also working with that. You're using that information. So, an example is following oral directions. For example, you're given maybe 3 different things to do. First, do this, then do this, then do this. So somebody with really great auditory working memory can hold on to that information and then do those tasks. Or remembering a story that was read out loud. So there's a lot that's happening in our language comprehension ability to when we're holding on to that information and really working with that. We're not just memorizing the whole story. We are taking that in and we're doing some things with that. We're kind of understanding different things that are going on or whatnot. So our ability then to be able to explain after hearing all that, oh yeah, we this is what the story's about, and this is what I heard and whatnot. So that really uses auditory working memory in addition to listening comprehension as well. So there's a few other skills that are tied into that. But it starts with auditory working memory. I have to be able to internalize that information before I can do anything with it. And so signs of weakness, maybe this is probably a big one, but maybe your child can only remember one instruction at a time. You give them three things to do, they only remember one. And it may not be the first one. It may be the third one you gave them or the second one you gave them. But they can have some difficulty hanging on to all of that, which is why sometimes visual schedules can be helpful for a student who can't really remember oral directions that were given. So if it's like a routine in the morning, for example, you're telling them, listen, I need you to go brush your teeth, and then I need you to put your shoes on and get your backpack ready. It might be helpful to have that visually displayed, so in pictures. Here I want you, here's a board, here's your board, or, here you have a certain section on the wall or something, and you can put little Velcro pieces on it. You get very creative with it. But it's, this is the first thing I want you to do. And then this is the second thing. And so if it's visual, for a child who has auditory working memory issues, if they see it visually, it helps their brain to just be able to execute those tasks because they're not having to hold on to that auditory information. So the other thing is they're losing track mid sentence as well. So that can be an indicator. And very often these kiddos are mistaken for not listening. So if they're not able to take in the information, they're trying, they're paying attention to you, but they're not able to take that information in and do something with that. They can be told, well, hey, you're not paying attention, you're not listening. So again, it's just certain things that you want to kind of watch out for because kids are going to be kids and there are going to be times when they don't want to do something and that's just that's being a kid and they need and that needs to be worked with, but maybe sometimes it's not that case, and that's the thing that we want to pay attention to when we see it, a pattern of behavior. We see this happening over and over and over again. Could it possibly be that they are dealing with some processing deficiencies? All right, so next one we want to go into is visual processing. This is a huge, huge area that we talk about a lot with dyslexia. So let's talk about what this is. So, visual processing is how the brain interprets what the eyes see. So, it's I am seeing something. How is my brain interpreting what I am seeing? So, how I recognize letters, I'm using visual processing for that. When I'm tracking words across a page, I'm using visual processing for that. I'm not skipping over words that are right next to each other. Um, Here's the thing, signs of weakness, or reversing letters. This is a visual processing issue. Very often people connect that with dyslexia. And it's actually not. Like dyslexia is a language processing difficulty in the brain, not a visual processing issue. But with that said, we do sometimes, we'll say, we do have these two issues go hand in hand. So, meaning like we can have somebody who has dyslexia who also has visual processing difficulties. And so they'll reverse letters. But we have a lot of kiddos who have dyslexia and they don't have this issue. And so it's very important to understand that because we don't want to use letter reversal as an indicator of dyslexia, because, like I had just explained, because it's not. So when we're having difficulty with letter reversals, now I have D and B as an example on this page. So those are our big culprits, or B and D, or P and Q. Those are also ones. M and W, if you think of any letters that you kind of flip around, or the letter E, the number 3, number 6 and 9. So these are all different numbers or letters that can easily be reversed. Another one is S and Z. So those can be have some difficulty with that. But in any case, so letter reversals, skipping lines, that's another area as well. Because you'll find as we go through these processing skills that some overlap, and it's just kind of by nature that some of our skills can kind of work by themselves, but often they kind of work together with other skills. So you'll see, skipping lines, that can definitely be a visual processing issue, as well as some issues with some of our other processing skills. But losing our place frequently, that can also be another sign of weakness for this. It is very, very different from vision. This is very important to understand. Your child's eyes, you go to the doctor, and let's say they have 20/20 vision. They can absolutely still have visual processing issues, because it's not about what the eye is literally seeing, as it is more about how the brain is interpreting it. All right, so now let's look at auditory processing. So that's how the brain interprets what the ears hear. So some examples: being able to distinguish similar sounds. Um, Sometimes students who have difficulties with auditory processing will have difficulties hearing where one word ends and another word begins. That's being able to distinguish those specific sounds. This is highly, highly connected with phonemic awareness. So if you have a student who has difficulty being able to hear the sounds in certain words, it's because their auditory processing skills are on the lower side. They're a little bit on the weaker side. Another side of auditory processing is understanding speech in noise. So what that means is, for example, you go into a room, and there's a number of people in that room, and a number of different conversations that are taking place in that room. So somebody who has auditory processing difficulties is going to hear all of those noises like at the same time. They're going to have difficulty being able to tune out what they don't need and tune into what they do need. Like, let's say they're talking to somebody right in front of them, but there are multiple conversations taking place. They're going to have a hard time being able to concentrate on this specific conversation, because they're going to be hearing everything. So it's having a difficult time being able to distinguish all the different sounds that are occurring. So certain signs of weakness: mishearing words. So, oh, I thought you said this, but no, I really said that. So they are mishearing certain words that are being said. They struggle to sound out words, like I just explained before. Difficulty rhyming. That's another good example. That's another kind of phonological awareness task, where they have to be able to hear how an end of a word sounds in order to be able to fit another word into that same kind of pattern. Um, so, very often, we think of auditory processing, and we're saying, oh, but my child's hearing is okay. Just like with the vision issues, auditory processing is not necessarily that I can't hear. Like, I can pass a hearing screening just fine, and I can still have auditory processing issues, because it's not about the physical aspect of hearing as it is more how my brain is interpreting it. All right, processing speed: how quickly the brain takes in and responds to the information. So, this is some examples of this are like answering questions. I can hear a question, or I hear the question, and I know the answer. And this is a little different from think time. Like, I may have to, it's depending on the depth of the question, I may have to think about it a little bit, and that's okay. That's not necessarily related to processing speed. This is more like, think of a simple question that you're asked, and it's going to take a little bit of time to answer that. That's the kind of processing speed that we're talking about. Completing work within time limits. So you have 30 minutes to complete this specific activity. Somebody who has some processing speed deficiencies, is going to need additional time. And I'm not talking about wasted time. So I don't mean that they're just sitting there doing nothing. I mean, somebody with processing speed difficulties is going to have difficulty doing a 30-minute task inside 30 minutes. They will need extended time in order to be able to complete that task legitimately. So signs of weakness, it might take your student longer than the other kids in their class if they're having to complete work, if they're having issues with processing speed. Um, they may have difficulty getting the answer out fast enough, even though they know it. They know it, and it's just like, I'm just having trouble getting it out of my mouth. So those can be difficulties with processing speed. It's often misread as a low ability or a lack of effort. So very often, if if your child is having difficulties with processing speed, if you give them a little bit of extra time to answer the question, um, you might find, oh, wait a minute, no, they're okay. They do know this. They just need a little bit of extra, what I mentioned before, think time. They might need a little bit of extra think time to get the words out of the mouth. So this is definitely one area that comes up a lot in oral speech. Okay, logic and reasoning. So this is our last area. So this is the ability to see patterns, make connections, problem solve. We see this a lot in like in reading comprehension tasks, like for example, understanding cause and effect, like this happens, so what's going to happen next kind of thing, or drawing in conclusions from what they read. So if we are reading about a particular story and something happens, we can often kind of get an understanding of what's going on without it really being said to us, for example. So somebody who's having a struggle in this area or a weakness in this area is going to struggle with reading comprehension in general. So that's disconnected from decoding. So meaning that they can decode well, but so that meaning, they can read the words that are on the page, but they're just going to have a really hard time understanding that. And we talk a lot about that in the context of literacy, but this is the child that is not having decoding issues. They're just don't really quite understand. They can't put the pieces together, which could be a few other things that are going on as well. But it can also be their ability to reason things through or to really understand what's going on. So the missing piece happens when decoding is strong, but comprehension is weak, talking about it in a literacy sense. All right, so how these skills work together. Here's the thing is that these processing skills don't really work in isolation. Now, you can have certain areas that are stronger and certain areas that are weaker, but those weaker areas are going to affect all of it. All of these different processing skills work together when we're learning. Like for example, a child weak in auditory memory and processing speed, they're going to struggle extra hard in the classroom. They're going to be heavily relying on their visual processing skills, if those, or visual working memory skills, if those are not deficient. So identifying the specific weak skill helps you to know exactly where to focus. And so this is why just a one size fits all approach, like, oh, let's just do brain training. That's not going to quite work unless you know specifically what areas you need to strengthen. So, what can we do? You can watch out for any signs of difficulty in your child. Just kind of watch, observe, kind of keep in mind some of the things we've talked about here. You can consider doing a processing skills assessment. That's actually something that we offer. You can, if you know exactly the areas that they're having trouble with, you can find targeted activities that help to strengthen that, and you can do those activities at home. And we often, especially if they're having literacy issues, we often recommend pairing those processing skills activities with structured literacy, so that you're able to strengthen both at the same time. So like I mentioned before, we have our particular program, which is the Learning Pathways Lab, and we actually have tutoring as well that we're able to do with students who have these processing skill deficiencies. So our tutoring program strengthens that. but we use the Learning Pathways Lab to strengthen that as well. So this lab is actually, it's a full activity library that targets those 6 different processing skills. And some of them kind of target certain areas a little stronger than the other, but they are absolutely phenomenal at strengthening all of these different areas. They're very simple activities that parents can do at home. They use the same methods that we use in our tutoring sessions. So we actually have a free sample that we're offering. It's called our Mind Maze activity. So there's actually a link in the description below. You can click that link and you can download that activity. And that is really awesome at strengthening some visual processing um, skills, as well as some others as well. So that I would absolutely highly advise downloading that activity and doing that with your child. There's a lot of different things. There's also working memory. Working memory is worked on in that particular activity as well, because you have to hang on to some information while you're working with it. So yeah, just have some fun with it though. So we also have a link in the description to the full Learning Pathways Lab if that is something that you would like to do. All right, so this is just a really quick snapshot of the Learning Pathways Lab. If this is something that you want to pursue, there's actually a link below. You can purchase that and have access to all of the different activities that are on here. So you can see we have quite a bit of activities on here, and they all basically they focus on 1 or 2 different processing skills. But like we mentioned before, there's a lot of different ones that are kind of working together anyways. So even if you're focusing on one, you could be also be strengthening some other processing skills as well. So we will start here in the Start Here button when you purchase the program. There's a welcome message here. We have a progress chart that you can follow with your child. And we also have an assessment that you can do on a monthly basis with your regarding your child to see what kind of progress that they're making. But in particular, I'm going to highlight the Mind Maze activity. So this one is actually highlighted below. So you can actually click that link and get a PDF version of that. But I'm just going to kind of walk through this and show you the Learning Lab version. So here we have, when we have our any of our activities, we always give like the purpose and the directions and everything that you will need to do this. Any kind of tips that we have, passing criteria is very, very important. And then we always link the materials right in the lab here. So any kind of materials that you would need, you can always click and you can download those as well. This one in particular also has a cheat sheet. So I can tell you that as a parent or as a trainer, when you are working with kids working on processing skills, your processing skills are actually being strengthened as well, because you're having to keep up with their pace and you're having to check them as they're going through and doing these activities. So it's really cool thing when you're strengthening your skills as they're strengthening theirs. But as parents, we sometimes just have, fatigue days. We have long days where we're like, no, we really could use the cheat sheet about now. So we always have those available. But all of our processing activities have levels to them. So starting from basic to more complex. And it's very important that your student meets the passing criteria for all of these different levels, so that they are not reaching a frustration zone when they're doing these activities. But we lay out all of the levels, all of the instructions for those levels. And then we also have a video at the bottom that explains how to do each of these sections. So you are absolutely never alone. You have all of the help that you need. And obviously you can always reach out to us if you have any kind of questions or whatnot. But yeah, this is the Learning Pathways Lab. And we're very, very happy with this. And we've seen so much success with this. So I can tell you, if your child is having some difficulties with some processing skills, doing these various activities will absolutely help to strengthen those. We are here. You can absolutely reach out to us if you have any questions. If you're interested in tutoring with us in the area of processing skills, you can absolutely go to our website and you can schedule a free consult with me, and I will walk through what we do, and we'll talk about your child's struggles and just see if it's a match, if that's something that you would like to move forward with. But we are absolutely here for you. This is what we do, working with kids that have these processing difficulties, working with kids with literacy difficulties, and we would be more than happy to work with your family as well. All right, so have some fun working with some processing skills with your family, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.